Brad Laurie, or Blockchain Brad, and on behalf of BlockVera, I'm speaking with OneLedger today, once again to inform all of you, the listeners, about all the key updates from the OneLedger team. And to do that, we have Paven and Aly right here as core members of the OneLedger team to let you know exactly what's going on of late. So gentlemen, thank you very much for your time today.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, as always, it's a pleasure, and you're very welcome, Pav and Aly. So, guys, just getting down into this straight away, obviously we've had discussions about the tech, we've unpacked those fundamentals, but you've been doing a bit lately, and this is a free interview entirely. There's no ulterior motives here, but we do want to know what is the crux of these developments. So let's start with, the word that's on the tips of many people's tongues, especially lately with some of your own AMAs, and that is Adastra. So what's going on there, guys, and what does it actually mean to have this partnership?
So the partnership concerns, like Adastra is a company that's a global technology company, and they're working across many different industries with many different technology technologies in mobile, AI, IoT. And so what we see is a synergy between OneLedger and them. While we can provide the blockchain underlying infrastructure and blockchain processes, as well as the blockchain technologies that can run enterprise business solutions, they can help us with some of the lighter weight interface work on mobile, connecting into AI systems and so on. So we think the two companies can actually work really, really well together. And they also have an existing list of clientele. Now I know, you're probably going to bring this up a little bit later about how we're kind of targeting supply chain, but they have companies that are well endowed with using supply chain systems and supply chain management that we can actually tap into as well. So that's kind of where we're looking at.
Well, Pav, let's talk a bit more about your tech, for example, because we want to see the synergies there so we understand how this underlying tech known as OneLedger can really help Adastra as well. Give us some updates on your development, some of the technological advancements you've made since we've spoken last, so that we can better understand why they would choose you as some sort of optimal underlying tech.
Yeah, so first of all, the biggest gain from our side is the speed, right? So we have, when we say interoperability, we have crossed the transaction speeds that are much better than any of these existing blockchains right now. Number two would be the reliability. So the way we developed our blockchain itself, it's completely modular, that you can tap into, like you can build a custom application on top of it very easily, and then build a complete blockchain just deployed for yourself. So these are some of these factors that would affect a company like Adastra to choose us, right? Because they have a lot of clientele for which there would be some blockchain needs in future, and probably right now as well. So we are in talks with a few of them as well. So they want something that can get them running quickly. We want some partner who can take us there, who can help us realize our dream. That's about it.
Right. So, Aly, I wanted to ask you, in the context of this announcement with Adastra, why would they choose you over some of these up-and-coming platforms as well? As you know, interoperability is a buzzword for you. You certainly can create that plugin. But there are others that are also relatively fast or claim to be and offer, a broad suite of technological options as well.
So when we approached Adastra, they were using multi-chain and some Hyperledger implementations. What we found was specifically that what we catered to them was the fact that our transactional layer is very, very modular, the way Paven was mentioning. We can create customized transactions for enterprise solutions. That way, they're not worried about being able to go in, being able to re-implement the entire solution from scratch the way you would for something like Hyperledger, or figure out how to recode enterprise Ethereum, right, on their own. What we offer them is a technical solution and also a solutions company, right? So from a OneLedger perspective, we're offering blockchain as a service, but at the same time, we're also offering professional services to back building a customized solution. So I think they win in the best of both worlds, where the solution itself is customizable. The team here is ready to help customize the solutions, and we can go to market with them.
Got it. So in the context of Adastra, can you tell us a bit about the advantages financially for them as well, considering that really we're seeing a complete shift now in not just financial paradigms, but the business paradigm as well, given that blockchain is already something that has strong interest, or rather the private sector and the enterprise sector, they have a lot of interest in utilizing this technology. But what does it do for them in terms of making them more, more productive and save money, essentially?
Well, I mean, it gives them a stronger foothold in blockchain, right? So when you come to market with an organization that has as much experience in blockchain technology as we do, it's a little bit different trying to than building that expertise in house. Right, we've built a customized we've built a blockchain for a public network, right? So we have the capabilities of customizing private blockchains very easily. And I think when we met a few months ago, probably in June, we had already mentioned that our private blockchain is already in market, and we can easily turn on private blockchains for any customer base. So I think that was advantageous to them from their standpoint. They don't have to go out and build a team, and then simultaneously. They're not worried about the development costs in-house, right? Because they can offset that to us. There's revenue share models that we're looking at with regards to any of the clientele that we bring on board.
Right. Sorry, go ahead, Pavel.
Just to add to Aly's point, especially when you consider them as market leaders in domains like machine learning, artificial intelligence, and IoT. For example, if you take the case of IoT, right? A lot of companies, there is a lot of synergy happening between IoT and blockchain in supply chain world. So, those kind of partnerships are where, that is where we are looking at. That would help them, that would help us,
Right. So can you tell us a bit more about the nature of the partnership too? And the reason I ask you both is that many people speculate now that the token itself is difficult, or is something that a lot of these new partners that are emerging don't really want to engage with so much. So how do they sort of see your token as a utility token when you forge these partnerships?
So I mean, you probably want to rephrase that question. So they're not as concerned about the fact that we have a token in market, if that's what you're going at.
Yeah, well, I wanted to find more of that, because sometimes we hear about partnerships where they'll perhaps offer fiat for their contribution to a partnership, or I'm not exactly sure the nature of every partnership that happens, but I do hear a lot of feedback from the private sector that they are averse actually to a lot of the token models.
Right. So I mean, we haven't. Depending on the customer, I think that's where you're going to run into those issues. With regards to Adastra, they're kind of agnostic to thinking about the token. It just will depend on whether the customer wants to do a private consortium and completely not use the token, or they want to use the token for external transactions because they need interoperability available to them. So certain use cases, yes, I believe that they will need to hold OLT to make transactions cross-network. Especially if they're accessing the public ledger. But if they're only working in their private consortiums, those type of things won't really come up as an issue.
Got it. Okay, now here's a tough question, and I know you guys are very transparent about this, but how do we build, proof of utility? Obviously, having talked to you for some time, well over a year now, you've always been about the build, rather than the FOMO approach. So how do we really start to evidence empirically that utility tokens are the real deal? They are something that are going to be utilized for real business.
Yeah, first, across the industry, I would say there was a reluctance when you say blockchain as such, to be very transparent with you. So we are building some POCs with them to help them get there where they're comfortable for the next stage. I believe the tokens probably would come in at the next stage. But for the first stage for adoption, they should know what blockchain is. They should know how that can bring a value add-on to their ecosystem as such, right? So that is the stage where we are in right now.
And in certain use cases, we're also talking about digitization of assets, right? And tokenization of assets. So that's when people start seeing the real value in the utility token, because in both industries that we're focusing on with regards to real estate and supply chain, one of our primary focuses is tokenizing the asset, right? So if you're thinking about a real estate property, we're tokenizing the property and putting it on a blockchain, so people realize that this real estate property is existing in the blockchain as a digital asset. Similarly, when you're looking at products in supply chain, when you're doing asset handover and so on, those batches of products will then tie directly back to a token in the network.
Got it. So what do you guys say? I'm only mentioning this because I tweeted this out today, but what do you say to those parties that say, look, crypto's devolved? You know, it's moved into the space of pure speculation and everyone's just looking for price gains. What would you say to them? Obviously, you can't give financial advice, but what would you say to them given that you literally represent a utility token and a real business, arguably, that's trying to move forward to just simply expand the potential of this technology in real context, in real business scenarios?
So, I mean, I wouldn't count out the utility token just yet, because we're definitely trying to make gains. And as you start seeing some of these projects come into mainnet, really that's when you're going to see whether or not these utility tokens are able to succeed in the market. And that's why our push has been significant when we're talking about a phased-in approach to our mainnet. When we have Kanos and Kratos, right? Both of them being phased in that way, it was intentional because we want to get the token in market as immediately as possible to prove utility.
And that's a perfect segue as well, Ali, because that's coming for you. Mainnet's around the corner. So Pav, let's talk about that. Both of you can, touch on this. It's a big deal to have your native token. That is the exemplar and also the crux of all of the utility you bring forward. So roadmap, mainnet, what's to come there?
So right now, at this stage, we are code freeze. So our protocol is code freeze now. So we have got the interoperability working between Ethereum and Bitcoin. So we are testing that right now, and we also are in process of security audit. The entire protocol, just to make sure the entire thing we are double safe. That's there. And after that, we are also working on with Ledger Nano. So actually Ledger as such for the integrations of it. So once that is done, that would be coming in along with the token as well. So then the next phase of that would be to come up with the actual the token migration and all that stuff. So we are already in discussions with some of the exchanges to see what can they offer in terms of token migration for us. Yeah.
So there's a couple of ways that we're doing this, right? So like in parallel to what Pavan's saying is the interoperability is finished on the protocol level. We're bringing that into the wallet as well. So part of what's going on in parallel is our wallet is in beta right now, but we didn't want to release it as is. Because it didn't have some of the key functionality that we wanted to have in it. So what we're doing is we're the interoperability that's available through the protocol is now going to cascade upwards into the wallet so that we can do transfers from Ethereum and Bitcoin into OneLedger. So I don't know if we've talked about the intricacies of our interoperability solution, but let me just touch on a few points here. With regards to BTC and Ethereum, what we're giving the capability of doing is taking the tokens and pegging them to tokens in OneLedger. So you have almost a token representation of your Bitcoin assets and your Ethereum assets within OneLedger. You can trade them freely over our network, which makes it super fast because you're not waiting for network finality from Ethereum and Bitcoin. And then once you're ready, you can reconcile that back to Bitcoin and Ethereum. So we have this lock and redeem functionality at the protocol level, which we're cascading upwards into the wallet and treating it as transfers. So it's an account transfer from your OLT or your Ethereum account into your OneLedger account, Ethereum or Bitcoin account into your OneLedger account. That way you can transact on it faster, and it operates just as Bitcoin and just as Ethereum. Now, that functionality is coming out. We also have the capability of doing domain management, right, where you can tie a domain to an address. And that way you have easy to use user names that you can actually send tokens to, rather than worrying about these long addresses. And then we're extending that functionality going forward. And I don't want to get into exactly how we're extending that, but the idea is
that would be a surprise.
Yeah, definitely think about OneLedger with regards to, in the public sector anyway, think about OneLedger with regards to reinventing the internet, because that's exactly kind of the approach we're trying to take.
Okay, so Pavan, I want to talk to you for a moment. So reinventing the internet, there's more coming. I can tell you're withholding both of you on some of this stuff that's to come. So, and I respect that, but obviously, even for those who are following you, or even those who are investing in your pre-utility, moving towards utility with the mainnet, they want to see this, FOMO trajectory. I'm not going to give that, neither are you, but they do want to hear developments, and you're proving that today. So things like mainnet are coming, the Adastra announcements there, but I also wanted to talk to you about the scalability, asset itself, because if some of the current platforms aren't really hitting the mark, and they're not, let's be real, you offer something that is for enterprise and it services that need, because right now Ethereum doesn't cut it with its speed in that arena. So talk us through, Paven, the imperative of these updates from a tech standpoint, so you can play in this sort of enterprise arena and be of value.
Yeah. So definitely. So when we started speaking to some of the enterprises, we got to know speed is one of the factors why they were not able to choose a blockchain, as you said, as you rightly pointed out, right? So then we showed us some of the concepts, like how OneLedger could actually be much faster than they expected. So if you take a logistics, for example, a use case, something like a logistics use case. So you have a location of a truck to be tracked across a point A to point B. Now there could be, and these there could be like hundreds of trucks on the road at any point, and you could probably have to take updates roughly around at least once a minute, probably something like that. Even at that scale, when you look at that scale, you need a blockchain that can actually adapt to it, that can actually scale to it, no matter what. So enterprises don't care much about how we do it. They just want the result, right? They just expect us to scale. So one of the advantages with OneLedger is that we have reached the TPS of 4,000. We have already mentioned this to you in the last meetings. So now the other advantage is with the side chains and all, you can literally scale to infinite level. And you could localize certain part of these logistics, these updates that we get. For example, instead of combining all the trucks in the world at the same chain, you could probably localize a certain portion of world, like for example Europe and probably certain countries to a chain that is present in Europe, and then there is a certain portion of the data that's aggregated in Asia. And then you could probably do some aggregation on top of it. These are some of the things that OneLedger can help enterprises to do and achieve.
Right. Okay. So because you can do that, Aly, I want to go across to you for a moment. Clearly, in the pipeline some of the names coming, because Adastra is just one of others that I assume you can't tell us because of NDAs. But as someone perhaps who's supporting the technology as you move out into proof, what is to come in terms of more enterprises, just in terms of verticals, because we've already touched on supply chain as well, and we'll talk more about that in this interview. But what's behind the scenes, just in the interest sector from the enterprise, when they are calling you and saying, how can we work together?
Yeah, so I mean, supply chain is a massive solution, right? Because we could be dealing with cross-industry organizations, and we've talked to some CPGs, we've talked to some retailers with regards to how they're doing supply chain, and what we did was we narrowed down the idea of what we wanted to focus on with supply chain into supply chain EDI, what we're calling blockchain EDI, which is really electronic data interchange, right?
Mm-hmm.
And these are the purchase orders, the invoices, the acknowledgements of these purchase orders and invoices being sent over a network that is pretty much archaic, right? Developed almost in the 70s. Their methodology for transportation of this data is through FTP drops, and so a lot of the way they've worked around getting this data back and forth in an automated fashion is 40 to 50 years out of date. So now we're looking at it saying, okay, you could really install a blockchain service here to transfer the data seamlessly. Every single node in the network or on your supply chain is immediately updated with the purchase order, the invoice, and so on. We can actually put access controls on this so that if it's Nestle working with Walmart, for instance, only Nestle and Walmart can see those POs, and it's not another CPG company that can can basically decrypt the purchase order and see it. So those are and we're moving from the EDI specification restrictions into something that's more JSON object oriented, and that way in the blockchain we can hold a lot more information structured in a way that modern day technology solutions can understand, and not looking at doing customized ERP integrations because the ERP system doesn't understand.
Right, exactly. And one of the things we do notice now as well is that, and Paven, you could touch on this for us, is that you guys have always been real about being a business. Building this model for the future so that you can sustain yourselves. But in doing so, you also need to have revenue. So I want to talk to you, Paven, about distribution, in terms of the number of nodes, in terms of the technological reach of your network and how it's expanding, but also in the context of you as a business. Because a lot of people don't understand that there's a centralized aspect in terms of business, then there's decentralized aspect in terms of the technology.
Right. Right. So, well, this is a very tricky question, actually. So, well, we have for the mainnet as such, for the phase 2 of our mainnet, or we have partners who host the nodes for us, and we have also a public program for people with certain amount of OLT to come and stake with us to be a validator. So we just want to make the network as decentralized as possible for the public chain. But yes, when you go to an enterprise case, it's a little bit tricky at that side where they don't want that much of decentralization. At the same time, they don't want, but the whole point of a blockchain is lost if you're not decentralized. So this is where, when going to the previous example of what Aly said, right? So that one of the best value add-on in that case of company A sending a purchase order to company B is that company A encrypts in such a way that only company B can see it. But company C, who is in the blockchain, can still validate that something has happened between A and B, but they don't know exactly what that is. So that's the beauty of it, where you can still be decentralized. At the same time, you don't lose the value of your relationship, or you want to maintain some sort of a.
Right, and that's the beauty of the pseudonymous nature of this, and also you can have that verification through the blockchain, and you can even have that traceability. But what about revenue, Aly? Obviously, you haven't yet hit that native token, but is there any revenue yet coming from some of these, or is that to come?
We're in proof of concept phases with a lot of these implementations.
Yep.
And they're companies that we're talking to with regards to building that revenue. Now, the revenue will be in there's different revenue models. So one of them I mentioned, professional services from a consulting perspective and building out a blockchain. So when you're looking at that, it's more time and materials for our team to actually build out the solution. And then simultaneously, there is a subscription fee model that we'd be charging depending on the tier of subscription. So, and obviously depending on the size of the blockchain. That being said, if you were going with something with our basic tier, we're looking at revenue anywhere from 7 to 10 grand USD for that solution. And from there upwards to, what was the final one for the 16 nodes? 25.
Well, you can always send that to me, and I'll put it,
something like that for the enterprise solution, and this is on a monthly basis, right? And imagine when you're looking at supply chain, you would have multiple organizations working together, so that kind of just makes the pot a lot bigger, right? Yeah. So I mean, we've done some pricing analysis with regards to what we're building from a solutions perspective. But yeah, that's where we're at. But as far as revenue is concerned, we're still in the POC phase, and we built out our pricing model. So once we have customers on board, we're definitely moving in that direction.
Yeah, and guys, to be honest, one of the things I like about you is you've taken all of this time. We've known that you've come out of the tech gates for well over a year, but you didn't rush the process to mainnet to make sure you had that tech infrastructure. The GitHub, Paven, how developed is this? How are the repos going? Obviously you're always updating this with the team, but in terms of us accessing this, are we going to find that there's consistent updates?
Yeah, sure. I mean, you can check out. So basically, we have a release management process as such, as part of any development process in any software company. So we have something called different branch in GitHub. If you get a little bit technical, there is a master branch and a develop branch. We don't merge to master that often, so we just merge to develop branch. That's where you can see all our developers contributing actively to the code. And for every feature that we work on, we also have a feature branch separate. And once that feature is thoroughly tested and it's properly working and it gets an approval from Aly, that's when you merge it to the develop branch. So that's how we do it. Yeah.
Right, and it's good to know that there's constant updates as well, because people need to know that the devs are active today and tomorrow and even in the past. And you guys have always been transparent as far as I understand. Now, Aly, I want to go back to you for a moment and talk about this correlation factor. I've been tweeting about this a lot lately. It's always been on the tip of my well, it's been at the front of my mindset, in that as you move forward in the future, let's say, when you hit that mainnet scenario and you start to do all this business, which you will do clearly with this Adastra example with these POCs, at some point that those parties are going to actually have to show a correlation with your token. So I wanted to ask you guys how you've set that up, because that's going to be really important.
And so define what you mean by the correlation with our token.
Yeah, sure. So let's just say in the future you do have revenue coming in, and because you have a service model as well, you offer through this tiered structure. So how is that going to align and correlate with your token itself, given that we see so many failed token economic models in the past, if you know what I mean? And you have the privilege of seeing all of these failures, not hitting the mark. And I wanted to find out more about what your plan is so that we can better understand how this utility model is going to work in synergy with this token.
I think the utility model is a little bit, I think we think of them as two different models, right? So you have your private solutions model, which is the enterprise model. Now, if the enterprises will be looking to do interoperability through our public chain, they will require to hold OLT. They will require to have a validator, and I think our validators are sitting at about 3 million OLT right now. So they will be required to lock up some tokens and use tokens on the network. That being said, if they're completely private and they do not want to connect to the public network, there's a possibility of that, which means that they have their own token economy where they're not using OLT. In the other scenarios, though, we're also building solutions on the public sector side, right? Where we're building, like I mentioned, we're building out the domain management system, and then the domain management system will then kickstart an entire fleet of products that we're releasing to market for the public sector, specifically looking like they are decentralized applications, but working all within our network, within our application framework. That way, they are very much localized to OneLedger and working directly with OneLedger's OLT token.
And that makes a lot of sense, because that's where the real utility is going to come forth in terms of that correlation, is the planning you've got for the public side, and those products. So when will we know more about some of these products coming up?
So we're planning to once the wallet is done with the interoperability, then we'll be kickstarting those projects on the public sector side, and then that would be January-ish, end of January, where we'll be starting actually the development for some of these projects. Again, leveraging on the domain management service, and going forward from there. I think you wanted to add something.
No.
Yeah, well, that's good to know, because that's not far away. Let's be real. Like, literally next year's around the corner. So, in the broader scheme of things, you're really starting to step up and really starting to showcase that you're not far off in terms of products, mainnet, proof of a really strong start. But then if we go back again, I know you don't like talking about this, but going back to the current situation of price across the board in crypto, we see the coupling effect of BTC. You guys have had your own interesting price movement, and that's obviously partly to do with speculation itself, the anomaly that it is. But in terms of the future, without commenting on, your any price predictions, what do you want to get across to the community in terms of focus area? Whether should they be focused more on this utility as opposed to speculation?
Oh, 100%. They should be focused more on the utility of the token. I mean, the speculative market will end as soon as we start proving utility, which we will in Q1 of 2020. And that being said, if they are holding and using the tokens as they're intended to be used, it's inevitable that the price will go up. right? Because you only have a finite set of tokens in circulation.
Exactly,
So,
and I'm glad you said that, because a lot of people think that because you have a utility token, you can't actually make well, I can, because I'm not in your shoes, but you can rightly say that there's a potential for the price change, let's just say, no matter what, based on utility. Because a lot of people assume that if you mention price changes that it's somehow a security, but this is a new model. This is something that hasn't existed before. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out in the future, especially with increases in revenue that you're going to be making. But then there's the tough question of exchanges. You're not in control of that. All of the people who are in OneLedger want to see exchanges yesterday, you know, because they know that that's going to really affect the price. It's going to affect liquidity. What can you comment on in that respect with regard to, you know, exchanges perhaps discussing the future listings, or are you aware of anything going on there?
I mean, we don't generally comment on the exchanges because it's not something that, you know, we actively look at, especially the two of us. Don't actively look at, whereas other people in the organization are a little bit more actively involved there. We do understand that, you know, there's a common sentiment out there within the community stating that, you know, if we're on something like one of the larger tier one exchanges, that, you know, there would be a lot more volume of trades and a lot more liquidity, which means that, you know, that the price will go up. That's against. But there's no determining factor that that's going to be the case. There's no determining factor saying that if we were to list a tier one exchange, that our token wouldn't dump even more, right?
Well,
so
it's interesting you say that too, Aly, because look what happened with Matic recently. You know, the drama there, because as we've talked about pre-interview as well, there's significant risks in the FOMO, you know, approach, because it's transient, you know, it's ephemeral. It doesn't sustain itself because there's a narrative there. But what you're going after, it seems, both of you gentlemen and all of your team, it seems like it's always been about that long-term sustainable trajectory of value. So do you feel like you're in a very, you know, small group of startups that are really focused on that long-term when you see what's playing out in crypto?
I mean, I'm sure at the startup level itself or within the organization, a lot of the startups that are out there are probably thinking along the same lines that we are, right? I don't presume to think that we were thinking significantly differently from what they are. We are very focused on product and delivering utility for the product, right? But we're not trying to go after the price hikes or the immediate gains from the speculative bullish, like not bullish, but speculative market, right? So I would imagine that a lot of the startups that are involved with a token on an exchange would kind of be thinking the same way. And if they're not, and they're just in there for the price gains, then they're in the wrong market.
Right, and gentlemen, as you know, many of the fees and the costs of listing is quite high for many of these exchanges as well. And you have always come across as quite frugal when it comes to, you know, managing your finances. You're not going to go and just, you know, pay a fortune to list somewhere. And I respect that a lot, because often other parties in the space are doing so more for the price gains and for the attention as well, and you never really followed that route, I don't think. So just as a summary today, because obviously, you know, we wanted to talk about those key updates from both of you, could you just give us, you know, those key bullet points that you think are fundamental for today for information about OneLedger, so we can just retouch and rehash on those, and then we can finish up for those who just wanted an update for what OneLedger is doing. We might start with you, Aly.
Yeah, so I mean, like Adastra's partnership, which is going to be massive gains for us in the enterprise sector. The focus on blockchain EDI and real estate for the enterprise sector, and then simultaneously our public release with Kanos, which will be coming out in Q1 of 2020, and the wallet, which will be coincided with that. And having a fully interoperable wallet where you can have the capability of having your Bitcoin, Ethereum traded back and forth with OLT, and a domain management system that's coming out along with the wallet. So I think those are my key things, and from a product and enterprise solutions perspective.
Right. I second I second with Ali.
Yeah.
That's about it.
Nice and safe, Paven. But I appreciate you both, gentlemen, for coming on. I really do, because as you know, this is free from me. And also it's about the community. They need to know exactly what's going on. And you're always willing to come and let us know, which is really important as you continue to build this technology, this startup. And most importantly, you know, really start to showcase what both the enterprise and the public sector can do in terms of benefiting from this as well. So I do wish you all the very best. I am really excited about some of that interoperability as well with Ethereum, as you mentioned, and other digital assets, because that's just going to support them as well, as you start to showcase, you know, what you can do in terms of a much more scalable solution as well. So I wish you all the very best as you continue. It's a tough, you know, ask right now because it is a bear market, but really you don't seem to focus on that. You seem to be tech driven. So keep going, guys. Don't let anything stop you. We want to showcase utility. That's what counts.